Stanisław Barszczak, Priest Millionaire. Introduction. There are two Christmas islands on the map. The first, belonging to Australia, is located in Indian Ocean. The second, more distant from human clusters, is located in the middle of the Pacific and belongs to the island state of Kiribati. There is only once a week a plane that runs between Nadi and Honolulu. One day in December, I fell from the sky there, fulfilling one of my travel dreams. The island was discovered and named by Captain James Cook on Christmas Eve 1997 during this third great voyage. Christmas Island, in the local language Kiribati, lies almost on the equator and is the largest atoll in the world. It covers half of the territory of the Republic of Kiribati. In the vast territorial waters of this country, it is situated in the east. It is more than 3,000 kilometers away from the capital of the country, located on the Tarawa Atoll. There are no cities on it. There are 4 small settlements around the lagoon, the largest of which is called London. The others are Tabukia, Banana, and Poland. Christmas Island owes the old concrete strip on the airport to the British, who conducted nuclear tests here half a century ago. This solid strip unfortunately has no lighting, so planes can only land during the day. Here one day I landed. I had already read Ken Follett and John le Carré, but it was still observing the modern world. Great disasters begin with small problems that are not dealt with in time, such as the coincidence of circumstances as a result of which seemingly minor conflicts break out in different parts of the world between the armies of the different countries. And moments later, the United States President is holding his finger on the button causing the nuclear attack. And it is not the only button on Earth that can destroy an entire human civilization. For example, Pauline Green, the American president, is doing everything he can to avoid ordering the use of nuclear weapons. Chiang Kai, a brilliant Chinese diplomat, plays an intricate game to stop his country's government from clashing with the West. Tamara and Abdul, CIA agents, work out the structures of Islamic terrorists in North Africa. Kaya and beautiful young African woman decide to make a dangerous journey through the Sahara to ensure a future for her child. But most of all in my account are George Zimmerman, a priest and lawyer from distant Poland, and Julia Majewska, who studied interior design. But we are the giants of similar stories of ours. They all make sacrifices because they believe they can make the world a better and safer place, as these heroes. But it may not be enough. From the sun-scorched Sahara, through the refugee camps, a fruitful mission work in Kiribati, to the offices of politicians and the saloon of the embassies. Heroes and cowards, prudent and madmen, lovers and enemies, the world that faces a crisis that may be the last one. The author walks from bay to bay on the modern world in search of Atlantis for the men of tomorrow. As last day in Miami, Pompano Beach, in United States of America. Atlantis, the legendary island kingdom, as a radiant metropolis, reportedly represented the most powerful maritime power on our globe thousands of years ago. However, all descriptions of gigantic treasures of gold and silver, magnificent buildings, and flourishing landscapes are overshadowed by a big problem. There has been no trace of Atlantis for many centuries. In fact, there has always been heated debate in the ranks of researchers as to whether the mystical kingdom of islands even existed. In my story, you imagine, you could barely find out what legends surround the world famous sunken city, and which ancient map can reveal the true location of the lost empire, but I finally opened another page of human history here. Probably Atlantis, with beautiful oases of palm trees, with minarets, with majestic buildings, with a magnificent circular port open to the sea, overlooking the horizon of beautiful mountains warming in the sun, survived in the turbulent history in one on the modern port of the Mediterranean world. It may be the Gulf of Santorini in Greece, Carthage, or any of the cities of Morocco. I will not say, because I intended to write a different story here, which I invite you to read now. Part 1. My name is George Zimmerman. I've been to Kiribati for 6 years, but how it started? I was on a mission in Morocco. I got here for a while, but I am already here in Kiribati. It is very far from the big world. Only 8 people got off the plane that flew to Christmas Island. 3 natives returning to their families, 4 Japanese who came to catch big fish, and I, a lonely traveler who wanted to reach Poland village on the island and remote settlement on the other side of the lagoon. In the hut that served as a terminal, there was a slightly lopsided inscription, "Welcome to Christmas Eve." The check-in process was very quick. I entered in the arrival declaration where I spent the last 10 days. The islanders are afraid of bringing diseases from epidemic areas, and I got a beautiful stamp in my passport. 3 battered cars waited outside the terminal. Mr. Raczynski, with a smile, the owner on one of them, gave me a lift to the main settlement. An empty, partially paved road snaked along palm trees and low green shrubs. Thatched huts on stilts very rarely seen. The feeling of emptiness dominated. There are only 4,000 of us in the entire atoll, said the driver, Mr. Raczynski. Soon I found out that his people were cheerful and open to strangers. Between the palm trees there was a blue and turquoise ocean in which, as Mr. Raczynski claimed, the local people catch fish 1.5 meters long. The car, of course, did not have air conditioning. The clothes were already sticking to the body by the time we got to London village. I found hospitality at the only Catholic priest in the atoll, the dark-skinned Father Kiribati. He did not remember if he had met any Paul in his life. In the courtyard of the presbytery there is a small hut for his guest. He lives there primitively, even without a ceiling fan, but cheap and, most importantly, close to smiling, kind people. I was able to observe the everyday life without any obstacles. For example, I watched a neighbor behind the fence climb his palm barefoot every morning to hang bottles in its crown. Palm sap drips down from the cat shoots theirs. The local add it to tea or ferment it into a light wine. In London village, the largest settlement on the atoll, there are modest dark shops selling basic necessities. There is also a post office that sells color stamps sought after by collectors. There is the Bank of Kiribati exchange office, and the most important for me, the local telecommunication barracks. There is a cramped internet cafe in it, from which, after several unsuccessful attempts, I managed to send 2 emails. The wind was moving the curtains, hands were working on the computer keyboard, and I was broadcasting from Christmas Island. The next plane to civilization was leaving for a week. The island has the London Harbour, as I said, a tiny marina in the village of London. Once a month, a small freighter calls here, bringing the Islander the necessary supplies and collecting the copra. Finally, I'm going to this Poland village. Kiribati Atoll has only one lagoon entrance, the White Canal in which Cook Island lies. London spread out on one side of this canal. On the other side is the abandoned Paris settlement, Paris village, and right behind it Poland village. To get to Poland in the Pacific by land, you need to make a big arc around the lagoon. We pass the airport and the banana settlement. Palm trees disappear from the landscape. Only low bushes remain. Finally, we leave the narrow concrete road leading to the abandoned second airport in the south of the island and turn right. The coral sand road, full of puddles and potholes, runs between shallow salt lakes where you can fish for white milkfish. On the other side of the backwaters, a thicket of coconut palms grows again, among which you can finally see a wind pump and a water tank placed on a scaffolding. Further on, a row of small houses along a sandy road. This is Poland. Among the household, I see large platforms on which copra is dried, white flesh shelled from coconut nets. Several half-naked men are packing it in bags. This is Christmas Island's main export product. The government pays 60 per kilogram of copra. Then there is a small empty church with a polished floor on which the faithful sit during services. This tiny Poland, only 32 families, 130 inhabitants of all. People smile and greet me as I peer into the sand-covered yard. Unfortunately, only a few of them speak English. The kids lead me to a small school with joined-up classes. Wire nets protect the window, and the map is hung on the wall. Do you know that there is one more Poland in Europe? I said to them. Unfortunately, they don't know. I helped them find my country on the map. When the next Pole comes here, they will probably be much better. Nobody in Poland village can say where the name came from. In one of these books, Mr. Richard mentioned a Pole, Stanisław Pełczyński. His name was a senior mechanic on a ship coming to Christmas Island for copra. Apparently, at the beginning of the 20th century, he founded a palm plantation and a settlement here, giving it the name of his homeland. Catholic Church of St. Stanislaus was established much later, in the times when the priest of the atoll was a French Father Bermond, who probably remembered the Saint Polish origin. Part 2. God created man with eyes in front, not behind his head, which means that man has to deal with what will be, not what was. If people read the same book, they would be living in the same world. You have to hide your thoughts, especially when you were born, due to your misfortune. A woman yesterday, Mrs. Julia, informed me about it. A teacher in the prime of life smiling at me from Poland village. She knew little about my faith. Religion is the most unsupervised of all parts of this world, I noticed right away, based on a report from a modern ship. It is inaccessible and isolated. There should always be a relationship with people, especially and with those who are not employees, employers, or trade unions, who are not members of the company or usurpers of most of the marketplace. The weaker Christianity is the more sun and the sweeter the wine, and the more Greek doom, the better life is. I have narrowed down my relationship to modern religion. And immediately I got into a discussion at the presbytery straight from Europe. I was a sailor for several months, I noticed to him, to her. On the other hand, I will also say that the Earth is not a permanently inhabited planet for man. We are becoming more and more aware of it. It is not yet the era of the dinosaurs. Moreover, there are many gigantic reptiles on the Earth. They do not serve man. In addition, the Earth is haunted by earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, heats, volcanic eruptions, and the dangerous meteorites fall on it. That is why NASA is looking for a better planet for Ukraine, for human life. But it is a distant future. What does the present bring for us? Biden's United States of America is arming Ukraine to power. War is inevitable, some say. Under the President Trump administration, such a possibility would never have been an option. Former President Trump is no longer terrified of such a situation because he would like to have United States troops in Texas. Someone said, we live in the pre-war period. The coronavirus pandemic is on the rise. 57% vaccinated only in Poland, my country, in Europe. According to experts, 70% of those vaccinated are needed to successfully survive the coronavirus pandemic. The real world with the underground church is also entered by me, the everyday passer-by of Europe, me, a bundle of poverty, paralyzed since dawn, but merely drifting, like the moment of leaving a great ship called Adventure of a Day, overturned in the waters of a new morning. This bundle of poverty is now coming to consciousness, the expression of which is the relationship between the contemporary inhabitant of the Earth globe as a hero and the pale dawn of the cosmos, of the universe. As a hero, I should have already set off into the night of the next day, I believe, and with me also words and pictures that could have conveyed the failure of the previous day as a lesson, because later there are no ties to the real world, only exhausted allegories, because I still feel ignorance as a need, and hence arises a pointless thirst for knowledge that does not become an idea because there is no objects with which to agree. Openness to knowledge gives me something new to think and give me the spirit of the beginning. I ponder, I can seriously fall into a science which, despite all my other activities, remains a longing for the truth. The latter manifests itself in the fatigue of the person. Fatigue opens up, makes porous, creates permeability for the epic of all living things, including today's animals. But if fatigue itself is the best action, it is not necessarily that you can start anything with it, because it is already a beginning and a giving to begin with, as is always said in a cultural language. The beginning of giving is learning. Fatigue teaches it's useful. A pleasant feeling that you don't need to say anything, but a general silence, look at the sea or something else, and even nothing. Thanks to my fatigue, the world can break free from its name and become great again. However, inspiration from fatigue says less about what to do than what to leave behind. Fatigue, an angel that touches the fingers of the only king who is dreaming while other kings sleep without sleep. Healthy fatigue, it rests itself. From here I tell myself, just rest, close your eyes and don't listen. I have nothing but breathing. More than once I wished it was time to sleep and not go outside where there is light, but to be in the dark at home in your room. And I was fed up with loneliness, and over time I believed that I was experimenting with all the possible arts of madness until it felt like my head exploded. After diving within our vessels, I watched the rear fin of the fish. Happy, who has his spots. He will no longer be, even if he has moved forever to a foreign country with no prospect of returning to his world. Someone who has been banished from his homeland. The more I realize how much I have in common with everyone, the less I feel for a one person. I will compare this situation to losing an entire continent in this way for a simple and stupid dream. And who was I to find meaning in life only in holy times of quite subjective whims? Once I read in a tourist brochure, the purposefulness of things is presented as an adventure. For the folder, an adventure will be a bonfire. For me, it will be flowing water at the edge of a sidewalk on which a person is walking. Smooth surface of shoe polish in a new tin. Freshly changed bed. An elderly person still curious about the things of the world. Everything has its advantages and disadvantages, and it becomes unreasonable at disadvantages. In turns, it's nothing more than a necessary threat of any advantage. One sunny afternoon, I was left alone on the ship. This time, you do not want to know anything about anyone because it is unique but inconspicuous, which you want to discover immediately in everything that is left exhausted. Now you would have to discover the inexhaustible everyday life which we ignore in disgust. Here I feel like walking, just walking. I can't do anything else now. There were night clouds in the sky, clear and tinged with the yellow ship light of the city, with black vistas facing the stars. And I was so weak that only the leaves moved on the trees, and only the leaves at the ends of the branches. Time passed inexorably, and on other occasions I made plans for the future with my stories. I tried to move Julia with my shared memories, but neither did she respond to them. The old jokes that always made her laugh did not put her off. She did not want to follow to the silently agreed games. Another time with my stories, I made plans for the future. One day I will go with you to this restaurant and will go to your coast next time. Though I tried to move her with shared memories, she didn't respond to them either. Once, when I was cutting bread, the knife slipped from my hand. I immediately remembered how she cut slices of bread for me in the morning and poured warm baby milk over them. Honestly, if I talked so much about myself, about my previous life, I was only doing it to distract myself. In Julia's room, I had the feeling that I was saying goodbye to something, not to my girlfriend, but to a way of life that has so far equaled hers. There was no way for me to live anymore. I watched my own thoughts anxiously, always ready to stop them. I did not want to forget about anything else, and I repeated in my mind the moments that had just passed, when words of a foreign language were processed. For something to happen, then something must change, or something that has hitherto been stationary must be moved. Look at the sky, I thought. There are clouds passing by and say, no, I'll never commit suicide. Slicing bread, folding paper is an everyday salvation. So, to get the thoughts out of my head, more than once I lay in the dark and held my breath, but they crawled back in and were everywhere. Time is running out of me now, and I am furious with the apathy of my limbs. And with rage I passed out, because I don't know where I am, because I have forgotten that I am in the room and waiting for someone to call me to eat, because I have forgotten myself, because nothing comes to me from the outside. Tell me where you keep me, where my thoughts take me here and there, in no man's land. There are no thoughts developed by me, but thoughts that arise in me. You cannot speak, you are silenced, that somebody kind of told me. Think of yourself as someone else. Think of what happens to him when it happens as if it happened to someone else a long time ago. And sometimes think of someone who has happened a long time ago as someone to whom something has not happened yet. A similar fight is like a small-scale war, but with the difference that the war is fought between fictional people, states in such a way that physical people of flesh and bones are only used as media. Instead, in simple combat, those who fight are masters of their own will, not subject of a fictional person to whom they obey in a war. When you are drunk, you tell your story. A man's talent is a story he tells while dining at the table while he is so drunk. Sitting in front of someone with a new and old idea, with the thoughts that the most natural thing would be to be together, and that it is utterly incomprehensible to sit like this, say in twos, each side by side. In November, at this time in our place on Kiribati, it is already so dark that you cannot even see your hand in front of you. Then you cannot spoil the hand that is before your eyes. George only suffers for what he does not know. What he knows leaves him indifferent. If you know something about something but can't figure out what it is or what it is, it attracts you anyway and you want to know more. Seduction unattainable. George felt lonely for the first time here. There is something appealing about being a stranger that you can savor, feel like sweet. It is good not to understand the language, not to understand the customs, to move like a ghost among others who are distant and unrecognizable. This is when a special wisdom awakens, the ability to guess. Only a stranger really understands what the world is. Also, Julia does not want him to be alone. He is sometimes impatient, which means she never wants to live for real and always wants to be in the future, in what will happen, but what is not here yet. Then it becomes like God. Sometimes his God gets tired of his light and silence and makes him seek from infinity. Then, like a huge, all-sensitive oyster, whose body so naked and delicate feels the slightest vibration of light particles, it shrinks inside itself, leaving some space left behind where the world appears immediately out of nothing. Someone told him, first the world is mold. It is delicate and wide, but it grows fast. Individual threads stick together to form a strong undergrowth. It eventually hardens and begins to take on color from there, accompanied by a low, barely audible noise, a grim vibration that makes the atoms tremble restlessly. It is this movement that produces particles, and then grains of sand and drops of water that divide the world in half. Each slot has two characters. Each slot is double. The sublime is also the fallen. What is merciful is also despicable. In the greatest darkness there is a spark of the most powerful light, but the opposite is also true. Where there is an omnipresent light, the seed of darkness is hidden in the seed of light. Evil is not bad in itself, it only appears to be bad in the eyes of a person. If he, a priest, were the president, he would order one day to spend reading the Bible. He would put the whole nation into the books, and our republic would look different from the very beginning. People always wish it was straight. Yes or yes. White or black? Yes or no? They are fools. After all, the world is made of countless shades of grey. We are all forms that take light whenever it touches matter. He did not want to be a Jew, but he already thinks that most people are stupid, and that is a human stupidity that brings sadness to the world. It is not a sin or a quality with which a person is born, but a wrong view of the world, a misjudgment of what the eyes see. As a result, people see everything separately, each thing separate from the rest. True wisdom is the art of connecting everything with everything. Then the true shape of things emerges. Equality is inherently contradictory, however rightly it is pursued. Enlightenment begins when a person loses faith in the good and order of the world. Enlightenment is an expression of this trust, but sometimes it takes organic work from scratch, as it was at the beginning of his stay on Christmas Island. Part 3. As you know, another week has passed. I stayed on the island till today, and now I teach incoming hosts to shell out the deal. The local don't make coconuts, because only copra is extracted from coconuts, Kiribati's main export product, as I said. The government pays only 60 Australian cents per kilogram of pulps. Women in rags collect wood chips and dung for fuel on the streets. It is difficult to distinguish from these rags whether it is Jewish, Orthodox, or Catholic poverty. Yes, poverty has neither faith nor nationality. We need to be able to keep a balance. If the soul is too greedy, too sticky, too many forms will penetrate it and separate it from the divine stream. Above all, it is said, whoever is full of himself has no place for God in him. The local people say, Father George knows the world only from books. Every time he sits in his library and reaches for a large foliage or a smaller copy, it is always as if he were setting off on a journey to an unknown country. This is always the great truth. No prophet can be his own. He has to be a stranger in some way. He must come from a foreign land, appear out of nowhere, seem strange, unusual. He must be shrouded in a mystery, such as the death of the Gentiles, that he was born of a virgin girl. He has to walk differently, speak differently. It would be best if it came from unimaginable places, from where all exotic words, tasteless dishes, unstable smells, myrrh, oranges come from. But even this is not entirely true. A prophet must also be his own, preferably let him have a drop of our blood. Let him be a distant relative of someone we may have known, but have already forgotten what he looks like. God never speaks through a neighbor, through the one with whom we argue about the well, or through the one whose wife tempts us with her charms. Imagine visiting our cemetery sometimes. But why measure graves and cemeteries? After all, there are not dead in the graves. Julia knows it only now, but before that she drowned thousands of weeks in the walks. The graves are completely useless to us because the dead ignore them and roam the world, are everywhere. They look at the world as if from behind the glass. They roam the world, are everywhere. They look at the world as if from behind the glass. They look at it and still want something from this world. Through the pink glass, it would be beautiful to live according to yourself, not to explain to anyone, not to have a master over you, not to be afraid of anyone, to keep the church well, to cultivate and trade, to give birth to children, to have your own orchard and shop, even the smallest one, to grow a garden behind the house, pick vegetables. The Messiah is more than a figure and a person. It is something that flows in the blood, lives in the breath. It is the most precious and precious human thoughts that there is a salvation. More and more often a persistent thought appears in his head. When was that the middle of his life? What day it was when his history reached its highest point, its noon, and since then, though he did not know it, it began to sink westward. This is a very interesting problem because if people knew which day became the center of their lives, perhaps they would sooner be able to make sense of this life and its events. Man has to be shown that he has an influence on his life and on the whole world. If he stomps, the thrones will tremble. History is a constant attempt to understand what happened and what could have happened. Feel like a guest everywhere, settled houses only for a while. Do not worry about the orchard. Rather enjoy the wine that attached to the vineyard. Not understanding the language, which makes it easier to see the gestures and expressions of human eyes, emotion that appear on the faces like the shadows of clouds. To teach someone else speech from the beginning in every place a little, to compare words and find orders of similarities. This state must be carefully watched because it gives enormous power. Yes, poverty has neither faith nor nationality. I was the miracle of my childhood, I will tell you. First, when I fell down the wooden stairs and didn't say anything for a week, and then when a supernatural force entered the stage through the window for me. After the church, my mother entered the room upstairs. The draft was open, and I was buried in the kilt. A long time after that, I thought that maybe it was so that God realized his mistake in expecting the impossible from man. For he wanted a sinless man, so God had a choice. He could punish sins, punish continually, and become an eternal steward, like the one who pounds peasants on the back when they do not work enough in your field. And God, who is infinitely wise, could also be ready to bear human sinfulness, leave room for human weaknesses. God said to himself, I cannot have a man both free and completely subject to me. I cannot have a creature free from sin who is also a human being. I prefer sinful humanity to I cannot have a creature free from sin who is also a human being. I prefer sinful humanity to I cannot have a creature free from sin who is also a human being. I prefer sinful humanity to I cannot have a creature free from sin who is also a human being. I prefer sinful humanity to I cannot have a creature free from sin who is also a human being. I prefer sinful humanity to a world without people. The truth is like a sandcastle. It consists of many layers that revolves a world without people. Then the truth is like a sandcastle. It consists of many layers that revolve a world without people. And the truth is like a sandcastle. It consists of a cake. It consists of many layers that revolve around each other. Sometimes they contain each other and sometimes they are contained by others. The truth is something that can't be expressed in many stories because it is liked by others. The truth is something that can be expressed in many stories because it is liked by others. The truth is something that can be expressed in many stories, as I said, because it is like that garden into which the wise men entered, who were going to Jesus in Bethlehem. Everyone saw that garden, something else, but look behind the porch. Women in rags collect shaving and dung for fuel on the street, as I said. It is difficult to distinguish from these rags whether it is Jewish, Orthodox, or Catholic poverty. Yes, poverty has neither faith nor nationality. The dancers are here in stiff mud skirts. All men wore such clothes even before the white brought their first fabrics. Imagine there is an elementary school in Poland village. In front of the school, I put the sign, no work, no cakes. The local Ascherbach's family are attracted by a specific challenge to polish the word so that you can see something clearly through it. The universal golden word. When you view the world as good, then evil becomes the exception, a lack and a mistake, and nothing suits you. But if we assume the opposite, that the world is bad and good is the exception, then everything works out neatly and intelligently. Why don't we want to see the obvious? Part 4. Today I sat down in our cafe on Kirimas. I don't understand. I'll start like this now and watching the next stages of my life of today. Childhood, fear of what will happen after my mother's death, traveling around Europe for months. I succumbed to a wave of memories. At the cafe shop, the dead are close. I remember a few months in Agadir city, a symbiosis of two worlds. Agadir is a city on the Moroccan coast, a city of a fishermen, sardine hunters, red evening sun, and herds of seagulls. The port reveals the Western lust for more power, more money, more status, more prestige, and a mystical hidden Arab world influenced by imams and seers and symbiosis of satirical and modern fairy tales. Arriving in Agadir city, we were occupying a 202-year-old dilapidated building with no comfort. The mission director introduced me to a house where bachelors, musicians, fishermen, and workers in a sardine factory live. In the neighboring house there is a plot of whores and demons, prophetic imams, and believers seeking advice, beggars, rickety dwarfs, cripples and hams, and finally those who have been swallowed and spat out again by the sea. The house has long since returned to its original state and returned to its natural state. What was man-made in it was restored through time, climate, and neglect to the rocks and caves beneath the city walls. There I believed in destiny, I ponder. Though I couldn't even explain to the sea what kept me on the edge, which causally ate our hostess, two husbands, and spat them out again, which meant the young German made himself unhappy with his greed and weakness. The people were willing to wait. All their lives they have sat on the shores of the passing time and watched its floods. And I got down there one day from the roof and went on a trip and fell into a storm. Snow covered all of Agadir city. Its petals, the dead played the most delicate close-up games, I recalled later. And now it's time in Kiribati. I decided to be a good priest here. After the preparatory stage, I entered the Marian Fathers order and set out on a mission in the Pacific Ocean, I will say. The Republic of Kiribati. English, the Republic of Kiribati. Kiribati, Republic in Kiribati, an island state in the Pacific Ocean. The Republic received independence from Great Britain on July 12, 1999. This state covers an area of 626 kilometers, includes 32 atolls and one coral island, Barnaba, scattered over an area of over 3.5 million kilometers around the equator. The 118th meridian passes through this area, which makes Kiribati the only country in the world located in all four hemispheres of the earth. The population of the young republic is now 120,000 inhabitants. Areas. The actual capital of Kiribati is Bairiki, a town of the island of Bairiki on Tarawa Atoll in the Gilbert Group of Islands, in the administrative unit of South Tarawa. It is the main administrative center of the Republic of Kiribati, seat of the president and most ministries. but the parliament has been moved to Ambo Island. Bairiki is also the seat of the Catholic Diocese of Tarawa and Nauru. In 2000, the city had a population of 36,000 residents. You see, following Plato's Timaeus and searching for Atlantis in Morocco, I finally ended up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You see, I read the catechism here for the locals people. Jesus' mother is under the cross, yet she does not live here. I ponder. I never wanted to write poetry. Poetry is skipping school. Poland's village is the pilgrimage of the next generations. Poland, country. The Polish blessed winds need to be ennobled anew in every era. In the pilgrimage, as in Poland, my country in Europe, at any occasion in summertime, the Pole is in solidarity with the other. You can't see anything in the pilgrim sand, but we walk more briskly. You see, I wanted to write about Kiribati and other places on earth as stages of the Polish national pilgrimage of today. We collect our idioms and metaphors again. We go, though pissed off, because they threatened with the Third World War. Poland will be the only one to survive, Sister Lucy said. Poland will survive under the protection of Mary. She will be a power, said Wanda Malczewska, about whom I wrote in my master's thesis on the history of the Zagórze parish in distant Poland 40 years ago. I am on Kirimas, Christmas Island. You cannot be silent and create silence in silence. Morality is the least of my worries. Of course, I was disgusted. I would disgust telling anyone how to live now. But if a nation loses its storytellers, it loses its childhood. When a child was a child, it did not know that he was a child. Everything was spiritual and all souls were one. Loneliness is the source of disgusting, icy suffering, suffering on unreality. At times like these, we need people to teach us that we haven't really gone that far. You can't trust anyone who isn't in love with themselves, at least every now and then. Even though nothing happened, George felt that he had seen a lift enough that day, thus securing his tomorrow. As of today, he needed nothing more, neither view nor a conversation, and above all, nothing new. Just relax, close your eyes and ears. Just breathing in and out will be enough efforts. He wished it was time to sleep. Enough of being in the light and outside. He wanted to be in the dark, at home, in his room. But he was also fed up with loneliness. He felt that he was experiencing all kinds of madness over time and his head was aching. He remembered years ago when he had been in the habit of taking afternoon walks along the lonely paths, a strange uneasiness that made him believe that he had dissolved into thin air and ceased to exist. It was almost winter. I just saw a friend die and started enjoying my own existence again. This friend, who considered himself the first man to experience pain, nevertheless tried to wish his death until the last moment. I was grateful for everything and I decreed, have fun, take advantage of the days of good health. Friends are living kind of a mentally insane and underdeveloped, but they were my guardian angels, and when I hadn't seen any of them in a long time, the sight of idiot natives gave me a sudden rush of health and strength. To you, in my childhood, I was the epitome of horror. I ponder now. I was not an interesting frequenter of salons. I had to overcome the fear of my genes. Terror is quite natural, that emptiness of the mind. The thought takes shape and then suddenly notices that there is nothing left to think about. Then he falls to the ground like a comic book character who suddenly realizes that he is walking in the air. It is an unbearable that when one is born into the world, he cannot automatically come to consciousness. That's strangeness. That's strange. No possibilities. Everything was predetermined. A bit of flirting, a few chuckles, and momentary bewilderment. Then a strange, resigned look from a woman, our housekeeper, who was starting to run the house again. She had children, a little community after working into the kitchen. She did not listen from the beginning, and in turn she listened less and less to internal monologues. Because she had problems with her legs, veins, she became mute. Apart from mumbling in her sleep, she was gone. Uterine cancer, and finally she passed away with her destiny fulfilled. The girls in our town used to play a game based on the stations from the life of a woman, tired, exhausted, sick, died. The hostess read newspapers when she was healthy, but preferred books with stories that she could compare with her own life. She read the books I was reading of Knamsut, of Dostoevsky, of Maxim Gorky, then William Faulkner. What she said about the books could not be printed. She just told me which particularly caught her attention. I'm not like that, she would sometimes say, like the author of her words. For her, each book was a record of her own life, and when reading it, it came to life. It first came out of its shell. She learned to talk about herself. With each book, she had more ideas about it. Gradually, I found out something about her. Once before her death, she said, "My mother can never become for me as I am for myself. I wish object of art floating peacefully in the air. I don't want to be isolated, and I remained unfathomable. My sentences break down in the dark and lie scattered on the paper. Once upon a time, while I was slicing bread, my knife slipped. I immediately remembered how in the morning she was cutting thin slices of bread and pouring warm baby milk over them, as I wrote about it. Then I had an experience, and still absorbing it, I hoped I would never forget it. In the sand of my feet, I saw three things: a chestnut leaf, a piece of pocket mirror, a hair clip for children. They were there all the time, but suddenly they gathered together and became wonderful objects. Who said the world has already been discovered? It was only discovered in relation to the hoaxes with which some people defended the certainties from others, and surely there were no longer any pseudo-secrets such as the mystery of Holy Communion or the mystery of the universe, with which to blackmail him. It began to rain, but the sound did not soothe George. The rain was not for him. It was for other people in this foreign country. The sky was not so dark anymore, which made it unpleasantly chill. As he was unable to continue his disgust, his annoyance suddenly struck him as laziness, and since laziness made him feel guilty, his nausea grew worse than ever, but he was already, as before, convinced that it was justified. At least this morning things were comforting. hot water from the shower on his stomach. He wished he could stay undate forever, and soft towel in which he suddenly smelled. His hair was rinsed years ago in another country. George decided not to shave. It was a decision and he was relieved. But then he shaved and walked across the apartment, proud of the latter decision. For something to happen, some event must change, or something that has been stationary until now must move. Look at the sky. There are clouds passing by and think, no, I'll never commit suicide. So to get to the thoughts out of his head, he lay in the dark and was holding his breath, but they crawled back everywhere. Time is running out of me and I am furious with the apathy of my limbs. And with rage I pass out, because I do not know where I am, because I have forgotten that I am in the room and I am waiting for someone to call me to eat, because I have forgotten myself, because nothing comes to me from the outside. Tell me where you keep me. Thoughts take me here and there in no man's land. These are not thoughts devised by me, but thoughts that arise within me. Nobody minds my text, so please don't block them and remove them from the internet. Here the error is not my fault, this mistake, George thought. As an honest and reasonable writer, I do not agree with the assessment derived only from the decrease of the powerful of this world. We commit many sins in our lives, possibly because we are not skilled and fully following the good side of our nature. The world shows everything upside down. Only Saint Francis said about it in the 13th century. Did the opposite. He did the opposite because he began to put the world back on its feet. Yet Kant, thinker, put reason and reason side by side. But Hegel, another thinker, already made sense of reason and not the other way around. Therefore, it seems to me that I am a cross-eyed zero, although I do not want to admit it, George noted. The grave is waiting for me, bricked up in the grave, in my mother's quarters, and I still stand in front of the human world. Why Poland village? Why did I come here? I do not know. Certainly fate did it. A god wanted it. I swam to the neighboring island to maintain the economic prosperity of this land and his people, to support the local inhabitants in their health, financial and internal aspirations, and finally I settled here in Poland village. Poland is one of the 4 inhabited settlements on the island of Kiribati, Christmas Island in Kiribati. The island has the hamlets of Paris, London and Banana. The villages were named in honor of my compatriots, Paul Stanisław Pelczyński, from an American merchant ship carrying copra, Poland village, which ended up on the island when its inhabitants had problems with irrigating palm plantations. Stanislaw helped them solve the problem and created a modified irrigation system, helping them build it and teaching them how to use it. In his honor, the settlement was named as it is today, and a church was built under the invocation of St. Stanislaw Kostka. And the bay in the lagoon was called the Bay of St. Stanislaus. I will probably rest here forever. After a while, George managed to pray, Heavenly Father, thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, to the world to save me and set me free. I trust you. I trust in your strength and grace to support and heal me. Loving Father, Touch me now with your healing hands, because I believe it is your will for me to be healthy in body, mind, soul, and spirit. Cover me with the noblest blood of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. Throw away what shouldn't be inside of me. Heal unhealthy and abnormal cells. Open blocked arteries and veins and rebuild and repair any damage. Remove any inflammation and wash away infections with the power of the precious blood of Jesus. Let the fire of your healing love pass through my whole body for healing so that it functions the way you created it. Also touch my mind and my emotions, even the deepest recesses of my heart. Fill me with your presence, love, joy, and peace, and draw me even closer to you in every moment of my life. Father, fill me with your Holy Spirit and empower me to do everything I can, so that my life may bring glory and honor to your holy name. I am asking you for this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Epilogue. It's December 24, 1986 year. We met our family yesterday for one Christmas meal starting at 9 a.m. and ending around 9 p.m. Sitting there devouring everything consumable, repairing Poland village and all the world's problems. We also reached deep into the hearts and memories for those who could not longer join us. Julia played a Christmas carol for us. I refer to a joint meeting and the tradition of leaving an empty place at the table for an unexpected guest. I hope you have had an equally fruitful Christmas period in your life. What were the words of your Christmas like? Will hope arise in us again, or will there be shadows of the absent? Let us believe one more Christmas again. And all day the Christmas chatter died down, another voice was lost. Come here, Jesus, and stay with us, defying the irony of the blackbirds. Give us faith that it makes sense, that there is no reason to mourn your friends, that whatever they are doing well here, but in a different way, and convince us that it has to be like this, that there is no more voice, but the climate in the either is still there, that they left to live, and this time it is eternal. Come, Jesus, into the world. Show yourself on your island to settle the scores of injustices, to fill the empty seat among us at the table. And just this one time, let us rejoice in the child in us, and forget that there are empty spaces there, and hope will arise in us again. The shadows of the absent will come. We'll believe again in one more Christmas time. And all day the Christmas chatter died down. Another voice was lost. Jesus, come here and stay with us, defying the irony of fate. Come into the world to make up for losses, to fill an empty seat among us at the table. And for this one time, let us rejoice in the child in us and forget that there are empty spaces there. Come into the world to make up for losses, to fill an empty seat among us at the table, to eat together, dishes together. And just this one time, let us rejoice in the child in us and forget that there are empty seats at the table forever. Amen.